Good evening, all. Welcoming you to the sixth webinar of ours on a dilemma of capacity creation to add or not to add. We have so many questions which will be unraveled today during the course of this presentation. Pointers could be like, the questions are going to be like, shall I create capacity and the capacity remains unused? What if? Or if I don't, will I lose my market share? Which one of them is going to be at what point of time and how it is going to be useful for us? The second would be, where do I add capacity? If at all, if I have to add, where it should be, whether it should be at the bottleneck or it should be at the resources, we need to know. The third would be, what if my productive capacity becomes obsolete? Like if it is becoming outdated, what if the scenario is going to be? How should we be doing, reacting onto that? Finally, shall I wait for the thing or should I be the first mover when it comes to the technology driven capacity? So how it should be, how should we be reacting to this? Coming about the speaker of the thing, Mr. Hariharan is the Director of Software Management Services, having 25 years of industrial experience. Been a visiting faculty in various B schools and a trainer on multiple topics and various forums. A prolific writer that he is, has presented so many papers and many business articles and business magazines. A certified in design thinking from MIT Sloan, and have been mentoring the entrepreneurs in their startup business in the initiatives. A few webinar protocols as usual. Members are requested to please mute their audio. And for your full screen view, you need to click at the right side where you can change the layout and choose Spotlight for the full view of the presentation. You may type in your questions in the chat box so that we'll consolidate it and put it to the presenter at the end of the session for the last 10-15 minutes so that we get it answered. And we look forward to this presentation. Let us listen to Mr. Hariharan. Over to you, Mr. Hariharan.
Thanks, Mr. Vasudevan. I'll just go to my presentation. So those who are familiar with Shakespeare will know this definitely. Good evening all. To be or not to be is the question. So like this, anybody running a business always has this question. To add or not to add is the question. I hope you could hear me. Also you can unmute and tell me. You could hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay, great.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So this is what Hamlet was doing a soliloquy, talking to you on his own. To be or not to be, there's a question. There is nobler in the mind to suffer. I'm not reading it out for you. The similar soliloquy many of us have. When we are running our business, many times we talk to ourselves. Hey, should I add capacity or not add capacity? If I have to add capacity, how much capacity if I have to add? If I add capacity, what will happen to this? So I just summed it up in this context. This is the theme of our webinar. To add or not to add, there's a question. Should I add capacity or not add capacity? Whether it is safer for the business to suffer by not having capacity, the lost sales and seeding of outlier demand. Quite often, if I don't add capacity, what will happen? I lose my sales. If there are some demand I am not fulfilling, should I take care of it or not take care of it? Seeding of outlier demand. Or to add capacity against an uncertain demand. Okay, if I add a capacity, what's going to happen? Tomorrow I don't have business. And by chasing the market share. So once I add capacity where I have to fill my capacity, keep chasing the market share. So this is the dilemma which we are going to address in the next 45 minutes. So I set my clock for about 45 minutes. Okay. The agenda we have is this. What is this dilemma? What are the gains and pains of the decision? Both are. What makes a decision challenging? And what the gurus talk about this. There are many gurus who talk about this particular topic, this concept. And what are the dimensions of the decision? And what we call as a 4D capacity grid. It's a framework to understand how to look at these capacity challenges. And finally, what's the moral of the story? It's not finally, one more finally is there. Finally is the moral of the story. And then move towards how the disruptive technologies address this capacity dilemma. So this is a kind of mixed bag we have for the next 45 minutes. The dilemma is this. This is my capacity. There are three processes A, B and C. A produces 70 units per hour. B produces 90 units per hour. C produces 85 per hour. Whatever A produces goes to B, goes to C and then goes to market. But the market demand is 60. The second situation is the same capacity but the market demand is 100. So the question here is that which is a better situation to be in? You can check you in the chat box quickly. We'll call the first situation 1, situation 2. What do you think is a comfortable situation? First situation, my capacity is more than what the market takes. Second situation, my capacity is less than what the market takes. Yeah, quickly you can keep typing. That becomes easier for me to have a look at it. Yeah, feel free to type. The chat box, please type. Situation 1. Okay, Pratik says 1. Second. Okay, first is comfortable. Second. Wow. Go further. Second. Okay. So in the first situation, I have a market, I will fulfill the full market requirement. Second situation, I cannot fulfill the full market requirement. There will be some customers who are not going to be satisfied. I will go to 70. Whereas the first situation, I will exactly fill the market requirement. I am comfortable, but I will be having capacity not utilized also. We will see as we go further. This is a dilemma which I am talking about. Is it 1 or 2? Some of you want 1, some of you want 2. Let us see both as we go further. Capacity more than what the market takes or lesser than what the market takes. C is capacity, M is the market demand. Should the C be more than M? When I say capacity, I am not only talking about my capacity, I am talking about my supplier's capacity as well. The whole supply chain I am taking here. Or the second question is, where do we have our constraint, internal or within our external market? Can C be less than M? Can I have my capacity less than what the market takes? And when do we add capacity and how much we add the capacity? This is the dilemma we are trying to address. There are some pluses and minuses. So let us look at the constraint is in the market. Meaning this is typically the first scenario where I have more capacity than what the market takes. The typical pluses, I will never miss a customer order. All my customers will be taken care of. I can accommodate any market fluctuation. Sometimes the market from 60 becomes 70. Sometimes it becomes 60, becomes 50 also. I can accommodate the market fluctuation because I got capacity. I will insulate the internal fluctuation from affecting the market. For example, what suddenly one machine breaks down, I can still go back and address the situation because I have capacity to catch up. So these are some pluses of having capacity more than what the market. But there are some minuses, flip side. Number 1, failure to realize the scale advantage. I can never achieve the full scale here. Because if I produce full scale, I will end up having inventory. So I will end up losing my investment in that context. I will end up having higher inventory. Suppose if I start looking at local optimization, I will end up having a higher inventory than what the market takes. And if there's a downside in the market, my whole capacity goes for a toss. So these are the disadvantages of having my capacity more than what the market. But the answer is not conclusive yet. Second situation where my capacity is less than what the market takes. Advantage, I can pick and choose my customer. In the first situation, I have to take all the 60. And if the customer knows that I am in soup, he will definitely fleece me also. Whereas in second situation, I can say no to certain customers because I can always get some advantage out of the market. So I can pick and choose the customer. My pricing can be better. I can consistently use the capacity. I will never have my capacity idling also. It's a big advantage I have when my constraint is inside. And very importantly, specifically, I will engage my human resources much better here. Because there is a very popular saying by one of the gurus of Toyota, Shigo Shingo. Machines can be idle, men should never be. So what are the minuses of this? The minus is going to be, I will lose out on market share. Suppose somebody else is having more capacity, he will capture that market which I will lose. In the process, I may lose my market share big time also. There's a big danger I have. I will have stock out and the customer will be dissatisfied as well because I don't have capacity to catch up for market fluctuation. So the market increases suddenly, I don't have capacity to catch up and produce. Again, a problem. And they will keep on playing a catch up during the upturn. So if you look at both the cases, there are pluses and minuses in both sides. So this is definitely a dilemma because I don't know which is good, which is bad. What makes a decision challenging? Let us look at carefully. This, many of you know Mahabharata, and Abhimanyu was entering the Chakravyuh. Am I correct? Capacity creation is like a Chakravyuh. You can enter, you cannot exit. It's an extremely difficult thing. Suppose if I am going to put up a power plant, once I put up a power plant, I am stuck with that. If I am putting up a huge blast furnace in a steel plant, once I put up the blast furnace, I cannot escape that. I put up a huge painting shop in my automobile company. Once I put up the capacity, I cannot definitely get out of it. So once committed, capacity becomes irreversible. So this is the biggest challenge why capacity creation is uncomfortable for anybody. Okay? Let us see what the gurus speak. Here I have taken two gurus for discussing this. One guru is Professor Muradian. Some of you may be knowing him also. He is called God of Operations. And the other guru I have picked up is Dr. Eliyahu Goldratt. Both of them talk about fundamentally, it is better to keep your constraint within your control. So typically there are three domains of control. The first domain is everything is within my span of control. Second domain is everything is in my sphere of influence. And third is it's beyond my influence and control. If you say market is going to be the constraint, I have more capacity, my constraint is beyond my influence and control. But when I am having my capacity as a constraint, my capacity is actually within my control, so I can be in a position to manage it much better. A few other specific points which Professor Muradian and Dr. Goldratt talks about. Number one, you can pick and choose your customers. If you have your constraint inside, you can pick and choose your customers. We already talked about it. This is one of the key points with which many experts talk about. Second, very sensible and very particular decision, observation. This is make your costliest resource the bottleneck resource. In fact, when I heard it first from Professor Muradian, I used to wonder, is it not a straightforward thing? You are supposed to have your costliest mission as a bottleneck mission. Till we went to a company which is into making water heaters. We found a stamping press whose capacity is more than what that particular market requires, even that particular region requires. That was a costliest mission. That was not a bottleneck mission. If your costliest mission is not the bottleneck mission, number one, you will end up having under-absorption of that particular equipment. Number two, if you are measuring the performance of the people based on the productivity or output of that equipment, you may end up producing more than what the market takes. You may end up having higher inventory as well. So therefore, making the costliest resource bottleneck is a very critical decision you have to take. This is a third major observation these people make. Next one is inventory will be under control if your constraint is inside, because you can't produce more than what the market takes, because whatever you are producing is going to be picked up by the market. So therefore, inventory will be very well under the control, and capacity must lag the demand. This is a very clear mantra these two people always talk about. Capacity should lag your demand. So this is what the gurus speak. But there is one more guru which is primarily bigger than these two. How can somebody be bigger than Muradian sir and Dr. Goldratt? That guru is Toyota. All of us follow Toyota. In fact, Toyota has got a lot of perspectives are shared by Toyota. Those are to some extent misled also, but there are, if you understand deeply, it's a very, very phenomenal system of what we call managing capacity. That's what we'll see also. Toyota talks about a concept called takt time. Some of you might have heard about it. For those who are not familiar with this word takt time is primarily called as a heartbeat of Toyota production system. What is this takt time? Takt time is let me explain in a much simpler way. Takt time is nothing but asking rate in cricket. I repeat, takt time is nothing but required run rate in a one-day match. So, how do you calculate it? effective operating time per shift divided by the quantity required per shift. So 58 seconds is takt time, meaning customer wants me to deliver one piece every 58 seconds. Wait. Okay, just give me a minute. Okay. Just give me a minute. Okay. Sorry. So 58 seconds takt time typically means every 58 seconds my customer wants one piece to get out of my factory. So which is nothing but more like asking rate in cricket. So takt time is like asking rate in cricket. In cricket we talk about how many runs per over or how many runs per ball you have to score. But in takt time is ulta. Okay? How many balls per run you need is what we talk about takt time. This is primarily what is the rate at which you need to produce. So suppose if you need to produce every 58 seconds one piece has to come out. If you can get out every 50 seconds one piece, you can meet the market requirement. Meaning scoring rate must be faster than the asking rate. That means my cycle time must be faster than the takt time. Make sense? So Toyota says very clearly, your cycle time should be faster than the takt time or lesser than the takt time. If cycle time must be lesser than the takt time, let us say takt time is 3 minutes per piece and my cycle time is 2.6 per piece. I can meet my market requirement. I repeat, if my cycle time is lesser than my takt time, I can meet my market requirement. So if I keep my cycle time much lower, say for example 1 minute, then I will end up having higher capacity. Suppose if my cycle time is 4 minutes, I cannot meet the market requirement. So Toyota always advises, keep your cycle time lower than the takt time. If my cycle time has to be lower than the takt time, should my capacity be more than what the market takes or less than what the market takes? Think. If my cycle time has to be lower than the takt time, should my capacity be lower than the market or higher than the market? I need to have higher capacity. This is in direct contradiction to what Mr. Muradian and Dr. Goldar talks about. So if cycle time is lesser than takt time, which is a mantra for Toyota, I need to have capacity which is more than what the market takes. So there is a conflict here. We'll address this conflict as we go further. Are you able to see this particular conflict, which is very crucial to understand for understanding capacity? Number one, many gurus say that your capacity should lag the demand. The master of operations management, Toyota, talks about your cycle time should be lower than the takt time, meaning you should produce at a rate faster than what the customer is picking up. So this is a challenge we need to address. Let us understand what makes the decision difficult. Number one, market potential. If my expected future demand is very high, it is in favor of adding capacity. But if the expected future demand is very low, then adding capacity is going to be risky. So this is the first dimension for this particular capacity decision. The second dimension for this decision is, what is the feasibility to ramp up or ramp down modular capacities? Let me explain this carefully. Feasibility means technical feasibility and financial feasibility. For example, let us take the case of a power plant. Can I add a 1 megawatt power plant? My power plant typically comes in a very comfortable 330 megawatt, 660 megawatt, 120 megawatt, 45 megawatt, 30 megawatt like this. Can I add a power plant which is 1 megawatt power plant? Doesn't make sense. So, there should be technically it should be feasible, financially it should be feasible. To ramp up and ramp down. The word ramp up and ramp down I am using not in the context of power plant, I am using the context of adding capacity. I should be in a position to add capacity or I should be in a position to reduce the capacity also faster. In modular structure, modular meaning in smaller. If you look at that initial slide I had, of what you call Hamlet. Look at this very carefully, this picture. He is having a small square only. This is typically what I mean by modular structure of capacity. So can I add modular capacity, smaller capacities? Is it feasible to add a modular capacity? For example, in call center, I can add a modular capacity. In an IT company, I can add a modular capacity. But what about adding capacity in a steel plant? Can I add a modular capacity in a steel plant? Is it feasible? This is second dimension. The third dimension is seasonality of demand and supply. This is extremely important. Seasonality of demand and supply. For example, but there is an advantage here. Advantage is quote unquote reasonably predictable. For example, suppose I am having in a business of, let us say, for example, making umbrella. Sales is going to happen from June, July, August in Mumbai. But I can't produce only in June, July, August. I have to produce in advance and keep it in stock. So when there is a seasonality in demand and supply, should I meet that fluctuation in demand with capacity or should I meet it with inventory? This is always a perennial question. Quite often, adding inventory to meet that requirement makes a lot of sense because capacity comes in bigger chunks. That's where the challenge is. The fourth dimension, very critical dimension, is obsolescence of the process and the output. Okay, if I invest in this capacity, tomorrow the technology becomes obsolete. What do I do with the capacity? I'm stuck with that. Or I put up a capacity for producing a particular product and the product has become obsolete. What do I do with the capacity? So either the product becomes or the output becomes obsolete or my process becomes obsolete, then adding capacity is high risk for me. In our discussion, I'm going to take the first two. The reason why I'm taking the first two is the last two is included in the first two. For example, market potential includes the seasonality. Feasibility, technical feasibility includes the obsolescence also. So I'm taking these two out. I'm taking these two as the deciding feature for my capacity decision. Let us look at what we call as a 4D capacity grid. Let us take it with some examples. It becomes easier. So these are the two dimensions we talked about. One is market potential expected future demand. And second is feasibility to ramp up or ramp down modular capacities, which is technical or financial feasibility. So I am taking this market potential in the x-axis and the feasibility in the y-axis. So I get a matrix like this, 2 by 2 matrix. If unfulfilled market potential is low or high, feasibility to add is low or high. Feasibility to add modular capacity is high means I can add small capacity, like in a call center. Feasibility to ramp up is low means I can't add small capacity, I have to go for bigger capacity only. So let us take a case of power plant. In the case of power plant, it falls predominantly in the bottom half of this matrix because feasibility to add capacity in modular structure is extremely not feasible, very low feasibility when it comes to a power plant. We have an expert of power in our audience, Mr. Bapat. Maybe after some time we will ask his views also on this one. So typically if you look at our power plant, addition of capacity falls under my bottom half. So when the market demand is not very high, I will not like to add capacity and end up having my capacity idling. So I call this as I dare to keep idle capacity. I dare to lose some market knowing pretty well nobody else is going to pick up that market. Because it is not affordable for the customer to pay for this, nor is it affordable for me to generate small volume or purchase small volume and sell it to the customer. So here I say, boss, my C will be less than M. My capacity will be lower than the market. Now the market increases. More people come to the city. Mumbai expands. Navi Mumbai comes in. So when the Mumbai expands and then more residents come in, more residences happen, more population increases. Then what happens? There is a potential for me to put up a plant. But when I put up a plant, I will put up a plant which will take care of my additional demand coming up, not only today, but also tomorrow. So this is what I call as deploy capacity, where my capacity is slightly more than what the market takes in the short run. But within few years, it will again come back to the dare box. Meaning, I am adding my capacity because of the demand already there with me. My capacity is lagging the demand here. I create capacity to capture market share. Because if I add up a capacity, I will find it extremely difficult for me to survive in this marketplace. And therefore, I deploy it when I am sure that this capacity can be utilized. So this is the bottom half. The upper half is primarily our call centers. How easy or difficult to add capacity in a call center? I hire one small area, put up 5 people with connectivity. You can all ask them to work from home. You can add capacity in a call center. Somebody will become Mr. Black or Mr. White or Mr. Smith, and he will end up what you call creating a new capacity for me. So adding capacity is extremely simpler in call center compared to something like a power plant. So it falls in the upper half of this grid. So in this context, what is going to happen? In this context, if my capacity, if my market potential is very high, how do I get business for me? Imagine in early 2000 how these guys were getting business. Sir, I have a 500 bench call center ready. You can plug and play immediately. So I always go with the capacity more than market because I have some comfortable protective capacity, not excess capacity. Protective capacity means a capacity enough for me to take care of my fluctuation and short-term market. This is possible because anytime I can add my capacity. Adding my capacity is very simple, very easy, feasible in small chunks. So I have capacity always more than what the market takes. The market potential is very high. Then came 2009. In 2009, the market potential came down drastically. When the market potential comes down drastically, I send the people home. If you remember in 2009, when people are trying to place people in different business schools, many business schools could not place even a single person. In fact, companies like TCS and all, they gave appointment orders and asked the people to wait at home. So meaning adding capacity was not pretty difficult. It's not difficult at all. Therefore, I will play around with the capacity. I will think whether to hold it or not hold it. Hey, should I ask these 4 people to hold on or should I ask them to go home? So typically, this box, I call it as deliberate box. Deliberate whether we should have this or not. Shall I leave some customers unfulfilled or should I add some small capacity to fulfill the customer? This is a frequent decision we'll end up taking in this box. So typically, if you look at this grid, if I horizontally split it, there are 2 boxes, 2 sets, 2 halves. Bottom half, if the feasibility is not there, my capacity is always catching up with the market. Upper half, the feasibility to add small capacity is there. I don't care about my capacity. If you think about carefully, I don't care about my capacity. So if you go back to Mr. Moradian's observation and Goldratt's observation, what both of them are advocating is fundamentally a focus on capacity catching up with your market. Why they made the observation? If you look at very carefully, in most of the manufacturing companies, capacities don't come in small chunks. Generally, capacities come only in bigger chunks. Since capacities come only in bigger chunks, what Mr. Moradian said and what Dr. Goldratt said is absolutely logical. Your capacity addition should always lag your demand. So this is because most of the capacity additions are in bigger chunks. But the argument takes a different perspective when the context changes, where adding capacity becomes easier. So therefore, adding capacity is easier in the case of a call center. Capacity addition is never a question in a call center. Unlike in the case of what you call somebody like your steel plant or a power plant. Okay. Now, there's another contradiction you're looking at. But whereas Toyota is talking about having takt time more than the cycle time. Meaning what Toyota is telling? Toyota is telling, hey, we should have capacity which is more than what the market takes. That's what the takt time concept talked about. Let us look at very carefully what Toyota does. So next 5 minutes I'll be spending on Toyota only. Some interesting observation about Toyota which is not easily available in any kind of writings about Toyota. First and foremost is, if you look at Toyota, where do we apply this concept of takt time? Those from automobile industry know it very well. Takt time as a concept is applied in assembly lines. Takt time is not applied in your backend, which is primarily your paint shop. A paint shop typically falls in the bottom half, assembly line falls in the upper half. If you look at very carefully, paint shop capacity is always fully utilized. because adding a paint shop capacity is not easy. I can't have 3 people to paint a car. It has to go through this dipping process. What you're seeing is the dipping process. It has to go through that bath, get dipped, and then it comes out. So for example, suppose if you want a very unique color from Toyota, you have to wait for 3-4 months. In fact, incidentally, Toyota waiting time is higher than many other companies. Toyota waiting time is higher than many other companies. Toyota consciously says no to some orders. They pull back their demand. In fact, that highest end Lexus, they don't produce, Lexus Century they call it. They don't produce more than 100 pieces. On one end, they compete with somebody like that. Other end, even the Innova when you are going to buy, you have to wait for the Innova. You can't get it so fast. Whereas if you go to a Maruti, you will get it faster. Because my capacity of the plant is determined by my paint shop. Assembly is an area where I can add a station, workstation. I can add up my capacity faster, of course within a range. It's not that the 50-60% addition. No, I'm not telling that. But definitely there's a higher capacity in my assembly. Assembly line, downstream processes follow the takt time. So what is the typical model of the story? We have to build it up right away. Why Toyota? What Toyota essentially does it? Let us understand it very closely. Let us go to Toyota 2020 financial results. I'm talking about 2 months back. This is the accounting statement of Toyota, consolidated balance sheet of Toyota of 2020 March 31st and 2019 March 31st. If you look at something very interesting, Toyota has inventory. It is not that Toyota doesn't have inventory. So there's an assumption that Toyota doesn't have inventory. Toyota has inventory. It has inventory in different forms, though their sales match their production. They definitely have WIP inventory as well. They have raw material inventory as well. Okay. So it is a myth that Toyota doesn't have inventory. Just remember this. As you go further, this becomes useful. Number 2, look at this statement. It's very interesting. This is the total revenue of Toyota 2019 and 2020. If you look at 2019, the top line is sales to external customers. Second line is inter-segment sales and transfers. Something very interesting you will see here. Japan has about 9.5 million sales. 5 million yen. Okay. 9.5 million sales. Whereas they have 7.1 million inter-segment transfers. Look at the inter-segment transfers of other regions. They are very low. So what does it mean? Japan typically sells to other regions as transfers. Transfers is part of the sales. And that is in turn sold by the other regions. More reinforcement you want? Have a look at this. This is something very interesting. Look at this statement. The vehicle production, financial year 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and the vehicle sales of 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 is what I have given here. Overall sales, let us look at first. 8930, 8972, 8576, 8681. Almost the sales and production is matching. Have you noted that? But something very interesting. Look at Japan alone. Production in Japan is 4309. Sales in Japan is 2226, 2019. Whereas, if you look at the other markets, production is 4676, sales is 6751. What does it mean? We talk about 8 muda or 7 muda, 7 waste. Transportation is a waste. Can you do this without transportation? Can Japan sell what they produce more to the other markets without transportation? Definitely not. They do transportation, they do have inventory. Okay, why? And how do they, but still they manage the overall, what do you call, demand, production and sales. That's very interesting. Let us go further. If you look at the same thing in percentage, it gives a much better perspective. Almost 50% of the world's production is happening in Japan, but only 25% sales is happening in Japan. So that means there is a big chunk of production happening in Japan. Other centers' production capacity is lower than what the market takes. Okay, let us go back about 13 years to another revealing story of Toyota that will give a much better perspective. This is from 2007 annual report of Toyota. These are the various, look at this carefully. Japan absorbs vehicle volume fluctuation, whereas overseas the operations are stable. Japanese capacity is higher than what the Japanese market takes, but the global capacity is much, much lesser than what the capacity takes. But the overall, they try to match it. How do they match it? They call it as Global Link Production System. In this, there's a very interesting statement made by the strategic planning head. Look at this statement. I'm underlining some specific statements here, which is very important for us to understand capacity addition. What he says is, we maximize the vehicle output and earnings while getting the most out of existing resources and working hard to curb new investment. What does it mean? They say we work hard to curb new investment. Meaning, I will try to reduce my investment. I will invest as late as possible. Invest where? Especially paint shops and higher investments. And where do they have higher capacity? Where the capacity is not costly. The point what Muradian and Goldratt says is exactly this. Make your costliest machine the bottleneck machine. Now, paint shop is the bottleneck. Assembly is not the bottleneck. Assembly follows takt time, which falls in the upper half, and paint shop falls in the bottom half. So it makes a lot of sense for me to do a catch-up game here. So what is the moral of the story we have for this? To build the moral of the story, let us take a few more examples to observe it, which is important. This is one more reinforcement about Toyota's approach of capacity management. Japan, high sales, high production, low sales. Everywhere else it is matching. That's interesting. So what Japan does, what Toyota does, typically what happens in most of the companies. See, automobile industry, it is very difficult to make profits for 60 continuous years. Toyota made profit for 60 continuous years. They made loss in 2009. Why they made loss in 2009? Primarily because they forgot about Toyota Way. In 2009 is the year when they made loss. 2008 is the year when Toyota was number one automaker in the world. The year after they became number one automaker in the world, they made loss. They faced huge problem in 2009, especially that some of you might have heard about this Sailor's crash. There's a American policeman, traffic policeman called Sailor. He was driving in a Lexus car, luxury Lexus car, and his brake and accelerator got jammed. He was running at around 270 kilometers per hour. He made a 911 call to save him. He could not be saved. And ultimately, that created a big problem for Toyota. They lost sales heavily. And when they had capacity, when the sales follow-up was more than 35%, they could not manage, they made loss. Ultimately, they did a Genchi Genbutsu, go to the root cause to identify what the problem was. It is primarily because of that slipped, foot pad. I'm not getting into that. But the point I'm trying to make here is that Toyota, how come they managed to not make loss for 60 years? There is something very interesting. Suppose this is the way automobile industry moves. If you look at carefully, the peak of the previous peak will be lower than the next trough. Typical cycles happen in automobile industry. Typical automobile companies, what they try to do? They try to catch up always. They try to add capacity along with the market going capacity. There is no tomorrow. So when they keep on chasing this market share, whenever the trough happens, they get into big loss zones. That's why you'll find many of the automobile companies make losses once in 7 years or once in 8 years. But whereas Toyota doesn't do that. What Toyota does is something which Michael Porter talked about elaborately. In one of his seminal books, Competitive Advantage, he talks about that, where he says, if you are a market leader, I repeat, if you are a market leader, you should give market share to your competition during the peak. You should cede market share to the competition during the peak. So that competition will put up capacity and they will suffer later. So this is typically what Toyota does. Toyota capacity addition is marginal. Though this graph is an imaginary graph, but essentially it is something loosely similar to what I'm talking about here. So during the peak period, my market share will definitely be lower. During the trough, I will try to keep up a better market share. The curve has to be made a little bit flatter in this case. A small mistake I have done. So typically speaking, in this particular situation, it will be something like this. Something like this will be my sales. When the sales is more or less flattened, then definitely I will be having a higher market share here as compared to my competition. During the trough, Toyota has a higher market share invariably. And Toyota never made a loss because they always add capacity when there is a definitive market about it. But then what is this we are going to learn out of this, and what are we going to carry from this? We have to carry one fundamental lesson from what Toyota does. We will see that with few more examples. It is important for us to see how we can add capacities in small chunks and where we should add capacity in small chunks. Let us take one simple example of paint industry. It's a very interesting industry. Till about 1992-93, if you look at the paint industry, they used to have the thing like, I make all the colors and then send the colors to my dealer outlet. Customer comes and picks up the color of his choice and goes. But the problem was you have so much of inventory lying everywhere in the chain. In some locations, some colors sell. In some other locations, some other color sells. So I was oscillating between excess stock in one place and no stock of the same item in another place. Jensen & Nicholson came with a concept called InstaColor. Asian Paints was the second mover. But because of superior distribution of Asian Paints, they managed to beat Jensen & Nicholson in that game very well. So what is the concept they came out with? We can very simply or crudely describe the painting process. It has got two broad processes. First set of process is mixing and grinding, where I make the basic colors. Second process is where I add the pigment, the tinting process, where I add the color. So what they did is they decoupled these two processes. They shifted the tinting process to the dealer outlet. So how do I mix the pigment? There are two ways I can mix it. One way to mix it is and then mix it. Yeah, please mute. Please mute. Please mute your audio, please. The other case is going to be where you can stir your process or you can shake it. So what they did is they came with a process called shaking. Not stirring, but shaking. Shaking and tinting. So what happened? They shifted the tinting process to the dealer outlet. So you as a customer walk to the dealer outlet, ask for the color of your choice. You have 5,000 odd colors can be given to you. The dealer makes the color and gives it to you. Now look at it very, very carefully. If you are in charge of a plant and if your plant is operating at 30% capacity, you will lose your job. But imagine, if you are a dealer, will you be utilizing your plant fully? Definitely not. Your capacity utilization of a dealer outlet can never be more than 30%. And how come they are okay with that? They are okay with it because of three fundamental reasons. Reason number one, the capacity addition is not in bigger chunk, it is in smaller chunk. If you add up all the dealer capacity, that will be much more than the requirement of Asian Paints. Am I correct? So what I add in capacity is compensated by the huge amount of inventory reduction in the whole chain itself. Point number two. This capacity also is, the risk is diffused, is spread because there are multiple people who invested in this one. Point number three, there's a huge flexibility in this capacity. Suppose if I am going to stir the product, every time I stir it, I have to clean it up and then do it again. But here I don't stir the product. I put it in the tin, put the coloring elements in that, close it and shake it. So I don't have to change over at all. So the flexibility of the equipment is so high, I can make any color from 100 ml to 20 liters in any quantity. So what essentially Asian Paints has done? Asian Paints has successfully shifted the process where the differentiation happens to the upper half of the grid. When I shift this process to the upper half of the grid, my capacity created in the market is much more than what the market demand is. But where my capacity addition has to be necessarily in a bigger chunk, the capacity was lagging the demand. So what is crucial, friends, therefore, is to look at our own factory, our own facilities to see where do I need to create this modular structure in my capacity addition. Let's take another example. Mr. Bapat, sir, whenever you want to open up, you can open up and add to this. Here's an example which Mr. Bapat is very well aware of. This is primarily a power plant. Normally in a power plant, you go with the big capacity. Suppose I'm having Can you see the presentation?
Yes,
Can you
sir.
see
We
the
are seeing the presentation. Yeah, presentation is available. The very presently introduced that power plant's picture is also visible to right corner.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thanks. Okay. So typically in a power plant, I will try to, it makes a lot of sense for me to go for a huge power plants.
Excuse me, presentation is not visible.
Pardon, sir?
Presentation is not visible for the past 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. Wait. I'll stop share and share again. Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
I will share again. I'll share again.
Yes, it's visible now.
Now it's okay.
Sir, you need to unmute.
Can you see it now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay.
we could
Thank
able to
you.
see, hear everything.
Great. So, just quick recap. In the case of what you call, like I was giving the example of paint industry, where I was talking about what Asian Paint successfully did is they shifted a most important determining capacity, which is my tinting process, from bottom half to the upper half, where the capacity became modular, capacity became diffused, capacity became flexible. And therefore, they eliminate the inventory in the system drastically. They were able to meet the market requirement much better because the capacity is no more a challenge for them. Is it okay so far? Yeah. Now let us go to another example. You take the case of power plant. Mr. Bapat, whenever you want to open up, you can open up and please chip in here. In the case of power, many power plant, if you look at it, it's always better to have a huge capacity power plants. This is a story of one power plant, which is actually kind of a merchant plant with about 120 megawatt capacity. This plant is a waste recovery plant. When I say waste heat recovery plant, from the previous process, it gets some waste heat through flue gas. They take power out of this particular energy out of this particular waste gas and then generate power. There were two challenges they were having at the supply side. There's a supply side variability in this plant. The supply side variability is I cannot predict with accuracy what will be the flue gas temperature. Of course, I can have some idea, but I cannot exactly take it. It's not going to be same flue gas temperature coming out every time. Second kind of a challenge I have is the flue gas flow rate also will be different. So I can't always generate the 120 megawatt capacity in my plant. It may vary anywhere between 110 to 120 also. So this other side is a demand side variability. The demand side variability was, there are two kinds of order I have. One is a month ahead contract, other is a day ahead contract. In the month ahead contract, in the month ahead contract, suppose Gujarat Electricity Board approaches me and tells me I want 50 megawatt power, I will block you my capacity for Gujarat Electricity Board. Megawatt for month ahead contract because I don't know how much I'm going to generate. So a major chunk they keep it aside for month ahead contract, and they also take a day ahead contract, meaning Rajasthan comes out and tells I want 10 megawatt tomorrow, I manage to give 10 megawatt or 5 megawatt next day. So therefore, there is a demand side variability, there is a supply side variability. So what these people have done is something phenomenal. They went for a very interesting plant, a plant with 3 turbines and 16 boilers. It provides a phenomenal flexibility in terms of, suppose the market comes down drastically, I may decide to shut down a few boilers, shut down a few turbines as well. So essentially speaking, this capacity is more of a modular structure capacity. Of course, I can't ramp it down. I cannot bring down the capacity, no doubt about it. But I can decide not to run the plant. So the advantage fundamentally is that gas is almost free of cost. It is not very costly. But whereas if I am a full thermal plant, I cannot have a plant like this. So what is the advantage they brought in? By creating my capacity in modular structure, I repeat, it is not added in modular form like what I am talking about so far, but the whole capacity itself is modularized. I can be in a position to play depending upon the market requirement. Mr. Bappa, do you want to add anything on this one? So Bappa, if you are there.
Yeah, I'm listening. Not particularly. You complete that. Then if you have any queries, then we can, I can.
Okay, great. During the query part, you can answer that. Great. If you extend the same logic a little bit further, till about 2000, one of the biggest decisions many companies have to take is primarily the decision on warehousing and transportation. The decision is to be how big the warehouse should be, where I should keep the warehouse. Or if I am going to choose to have my own fleet of vehicle, how much vehicle I should have, what kinds of vehicle I should have. Post 2000, what happened? Many of the companies are not having their own warehouse. Many of the companies are not having their own, the vehicles also. That's where the concept of 3PL came in drastically. The advantage of 3PL essentially, the whole capacity is kept by somebody else. But whereas I managed to use this capacity, as and when I want it, I can pick up the capacity. So they created a huge amount of modular structure in that process. Another example. Till about 2007-2008, one of the biggest decisions many companies have to take is how big my IT capacity should be. For example, when I want to go and buy the laptop, that guy told me at that time, I'm talking about 2007-2008, sir, this is having a higher memory, you please buy this. But after 2007-2008, what has happened? When I went to buy a laptop in Dell, the Dell guy said, sir, you go for this laptop, the memory is very low in this, but you can use the cloud. So because of my cloud, the decision how much capacity I should add in my IT infrastructure is no more a decision for me. So the point is fundamentally, how do I move towards modular structure of capacity creation? The more I move towards modular structure of capacity creation, and if it is feasible, then it doesn't matter where the constraint is. So quickly, the moral of the story is, if capacity ramp up or ramp down can be made modular or discrete, it doesn't matter where the constraint is. So what Muradian sir and Dr. Goldratt said is absolutely logical, where my ramping up and ramping down cannot be modular, which is a fact in many of the companies. So what we need to search for is, we have to search for how do I add this capacity in a modular structure. Number 2, I should seek options to modularize capacity addition, like what Asian Paints has done, like what Airbnb has done, like what Uber has done, so or like what cloud computing has done, like what 3PL has done, like what this power company also in a way done. And one more aspect, if the capacity is made flexible, then it enables discretization. In fact, didn't even talk about flexibility in this discussion. As a separate topic by itself, it deserves. So there are two models. One is make the structure modular, make it flexible. Then it doesn't matter where the constraint is. In this context, the final conclusion comes from disruption. Many of the disruptive technologies actually address this capacity dilemma very well. Look at it very carefully. I have drawn extensively from this McKinsey report. You can do a Google search and get this report on disruptive technologies. McKinsey talks about 12 disruptive technologies. This is a very old report, 7-year-old report is a very old report in disruption. But still, you will get a lot of perspectives in this, because what they talked about in 2013 is happening in 2020. Okay? But what is common to all these disruptive technologies, predominantly common factors are this. Number 1, many of these capacities are discrete capacity. You will see that thing, then you will appreciate it better. Many of the disruptive technologies are coming in discrete or modular capacities. Number 2, many of these have very short technology life cycle. So if I commit a huge capital commitment, I'll be in soup. So many of the technologies want you to commit lesser. It is disruptive only when you commit lesser. 3. It is always better to be a second mover. Means what? First time when I purchased a pen drive, I still remember, about 500 MB pen drive, I think. I paid around 4,000 rupees for that. Somewhere in 2002, 2003. People used to laugh at it. I was a first mover. Nonsense. It doesn't make any sense at all at that time. But if you look at now, it's so cheap. Second mover has a lot of advantages in technology. Very, very important. Technology, the cost falls down drastically. Take the case of 3D printers. It used to be in crores earlier. You can get a 1 or 2 lakh hobby printer at home also now these days. 3D printers are available at this price. Very, very important. There's a huge mass at the back end, like cloud or like even third-party logistics. Let us look at some of these very interesting perspectives. This is from a report of March 2019 of International Finance Corporation. This is on power plants. This is a conventional centralized power concept. Power plant is there. From there it will go to transmission, transmission to distribution, distribution to house, commercial building, factory and apartment building. Now how is it changing now? Not changed. Changing now. Or underway. There is a power plant which gives power. Wherever there is a battery symbol is there, people are storing power there. There is a solar PV power plant. Commercial building also generates power. House with solar PV. EV charging station. House with fuel cell. Wind power plant. So there are multiple places from there the energy is getting generated. So you can have your energy generation from the window. So that goes and then through a central grid it gets distributed as well. Meaning generation is getting decentralized. It's very interesting thing. You can have a look at this particular report also available in the internet. Reinventing business through disruptive technologies. How, if you look at in this case, energy generation also is becoming discretized, modularized. Because of storage solutions, it is becoming feasible. Please look at carefully. Energy cannot be stored. But storage solutions also are improving tremendously. There are about 12 technologies. Very quickly we'll have a look at it and then conclude. First is mobile internet, which all of us, 2013 they talked about it. It's happening in a big way now. This totally inexpensive and it is able to, small devices are computing much. It has become modularized, discretized. So adding capacity is becoming extremely easier. Automation of knowledge work. A lot of software systems that can perform knowledge work and using unstructured commands and subtle judgment. At the back end, volume can be created here for this. IoT. Low-cost sensors and actuators for data collection. So it is becoming much cheaper than what it used to be earlier. And therefore, I can add capacities much easier in modular way. Very, very important cloud. And all these things work together. Again, this comes in a modular structure. You can add, you can purchase capacity, you can hire capacity in any quantity you want. It's not like I have to invest heavily in this one. Because somebody is already having the backend. Mass in the backend. Advanced robotics. You have robotics for home also these days. You have home cleaning robotics as well. So if you look at that Wuhan COVID response, the robots are actually giving the medicine and everything as well. Again, small additions. Of course, driverless cars. Next generation genomic. Again, this one, low-cost gene sequencing is happening. And therefore, addressing the disease at the root level itself is what they are talking about. This is one of the most important innovation for most of the discretization, which is primarily energy storage. Okay. Again, it has discretized the whole business. This is another phenomenal ingredient to our disruptive technology to discretization, which is 3D printing. Okay. Almost, I think they come up to titanium to print. They couldn't print jewelry yet. They couldn't print steel yet, but they will. In fact, they started printing houses also these days. Advanced material. So advanced material, if you can combine with 3D printing, you can get a deadly combination here. Again, adding small volume at any point of time is easier. Something like graphene. This is your hydrocarbon. And of course, renewable energy. So if you look at most of this case, renewable energy, advanced material, 3D printing, gene sequencing, low-cost automation, your cloud computing, mobile technology, they all come in discrete form, in modular structure. So to conclude, if capacity ramp up and ramp down can be made modular or discrete, it doesn't matter where the constraint is. Seek options to modularize capacity addition. If capacity is made flexible, then it enables discretization. So these are the two solutions for capacity dilemma. I think with that, I will conclude my discussion and opening up this for any questions. I'm opening this for any questions. Anybody has a question, you can open up. Mr. Babu, do you want to add something? You can please add.
Hello.
Yeah, Mr. Babu.
If you are listening, we'll speak.
Yeah, I'm through with my presentation.
I may have a question. Don't worry.
Please, sir.
Okay. No. Any questions?
Yeah, I'm listening, sir.
No, if any questions are there, then otherwise we can.
I got a small doubt over that. I'm
Please.
Chandrasekhar from Pondicherry. As for the Toyota system, the cycle time is very lower than the takt time.
Not very lower, marginally lower.
Yeah. If it is very lower, automatically it will go to the filing of inventory, isn't it?
Yes, it will. So one of the important thing about cycle time and takt time thing is cycle time should be as close to the takt time.
Okay. Number two.
Okay, it cannot be very low.
Okay, and moreover, now in all the present companies are having the 3PL system that is advisable for all the companies, isn't it? Instead of investing so much of amount in consulting that area, it is better you can leave it to somebody and we can pay the rent in the form of salary.
That is precisely the point I'm making. So the advantage you are getting is primarily you are able to add capacity in a modular form now.
Yeah.
Am I correct? You don't have to take the whole thing together.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
How
So this
about
is
capacity
Darshan here.
expansion increase? Yeah, Darshan. I'm reading your question only. What about capacity expansion, increase product range, right?
Yes, sir. To increase product range and also in terms of a strategic call. For example, we are seeing the loss of migrant laborers, and that seems to be more and more of a challenge going forward. So what about adding capacity or making a capital investment to move from manual labor to automation and reduce dependence on labor? For example, how do you take those kind of decisions?
See, if you are going to go for automation, as I said earlier, if the technology of which you are bringing in through automation is having highly obsolescent risk is there, then you have to be careful in adding that automation. When we say low-cost automation, one of the key parts of low-cost automation has to be low-cost, naturally. So that means you have to have that flexibility in that technology. Okay?
Right.
Number one. Number two, when I am moving from less dependence on labor and move towards technology in that sense, we have to see you are into rubber parts. Am I correct, Darshan?
Sorry, sir, your voice kept in between.
You are into rubber parts, right?
That's correct, sir. We are into rubber parts. That's correct.
Yeah. So extrusion, and you have a lot of what you call mixing, and so many things are going to happen. Correct?
Right. So we are primarily focused on molding. So I'm talking about shifting from, say, compression molding on normal presses to injection molding, for example.
So injection molding definitely calls for what?
Yes, that's correct.
So if volume is not going to justify, so you need flexibility in that particular injection molding machine also. So what prevents the flexibility in the injection molding is primarily mold change.
Right.
Okay. And the mold change and especially preheating is what is going to be important here.
Okay.
So you have to look at how I'm going to use my technology to meet that requirement. So I cannot have a machine which is going to make only one part, definitely. And if I'm going to take enormous time to change over, your machine is going to be half the time wasting its time in actually getting set up also. Am I correct?
Correct.
So that is where you have to be careful about the automation. Automation is not necessarily a solution, Darshan.
Okay.
Unless automation is going to be coming with an advantage of flexibility with that.
Right. And what if it is giving you more added product range which you are not having today? So suppose a new equipment is going to give you the flexibility to do something that you're not doing today in your own field.
Again, that's a small challenge for you in that case, because you are not one who is actually making the original product. You are more of a supplier to a OEM kind of thing. Am I correct?
Correct. Absolutely.
So therefore, you don't have a choice of going for a common parts.
Correct.
Okay. Suppose first I'll divide this into two parts. If I am a OEM, I'm looking at what you call a solution for this particular challenge of what you call variety. I will create mass at the back end. When you say mass customization, there's nothing but creating mass in the back end. When I say I'm creating mass in the back end, what am I trying to do? I'm trying to go for part commonization and part count reduction. Am I correct?
Correct.
But Darshan cannot do that because he is actually supplying parts.
Exactly.
But therefore, what is the thing you have to necessarily focus? You need to focus on flexibility in your processes.
Okay.
What prevents flexibility in process is essentially your machines are going to be making only one type of a product, then the flexibility is not there. Or your machines cannot be changeover is taking much longer time, then flexibility is a danger. Or when I change over from one to another, the wastage is very high, then flexibility is in danger. Am I correct, Darshan? And in case I am having manual processes, if my people are not multi-skilled, my flexibility is in danger.
Right.
So the only way you can address flexibility.
Right. So if investment is giving us the flexibility of meeting existing demand,
but
by
provided volume
having
should
certain
be,
minor change,
provided
volumes are there. Of course. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Hello.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, this is Ramarao from jewelry industry.
Yes, Ramrao.
So in the current COVID situation, we are running with only 10% capacity, where we have got a huge order pile up. There is a huge order. Really, I can have next 4-5 months orders.
Okay.
So this is a critical situation. Do you have any suggestion to how to address this short term? We do not know that when the government is going to come back with the normal working. So what do you suggest? I have some solutions on going for mechanization. Whether it is the right decision to go for mechanization or automation.
If you're going to create a capacity now, what if the capacity remains idle tomorrow?
No, I'm just looking at converting the manual operation into the machine.
Agreed, Ramrao. Agreed. Suppose you're converting the manual into a machine operation primarily.
Yeah.
What if tomorrow, if the capacity remains idle? See, one of the advantage you have is fundamentally the manual operation. If you really look at it carefully. Am I correct? As a jeweler entity.
Yes. No.
Okay, one thing, if you can look at it fundamentally, can I make this particular, ultimately what this jewelry making is? Is jewelry making an art or jewelry design is an art?
Making is art. Yeah.
No, you think about carefully. Ultimately, it's a combination of something. Essentially, design is an art.
Design is art. Yes, design is art.
So when I'm having, but what is the mistake most of the jewelers do is we start calling our jewelry process itself as a unique process. Process cannot be unique. It has to be converted into a standard process.
Yeah.
In fact, you should spend the time now to see how you can standardize the processes. Then multi-scaling is possible.
Yeah.
But you are in a much better position than many other companies in that sense. You say that I have got a lot of what you call orders with me. God bless. That's good, yeah. Okay. So can I use that advantage of what you call creating multi-skill here? Then you will be managing.
Hariharan, I have a question.
Please.
No, the demand is not likely to pick up for now almost a year at least. Okay, so everybody is expecting to have actually idle capacity rather than having a decision to. So in what way one can address this utilization of idle capacity? What options do the industry have in terms of really using the capacity?
The fact remains,
we are not like in no sector the capacity will be fully utilized now. At least
yes, Yes, yes.
So what does one really do?
See, one point is that in the current situation, for another few months, as you rightly said, maybe even 6 months, I cannot use my capacity fully at all. It's a fact. However, I would say that this is a time where I can look at making my capacity itself as flexible. If I can make my capacity flexible in the intervening period of time, I think I will be much better off tomorrow than what I am today. Today, what is happening is, if you say my current problem is absolutely blinding my whole approach towards the problem solving. So if, let us take the case of Ramura's example itself. I have capacity, he has capacity where he can use only 10% he says. He has got order for next 4 months. Now, is it possible for me to ensure that I am able to make my people multi-skill? If I make my people multi-skill, tomorrow this is going to help me to actually add capacity. What I mean by that? If my capacity is used for product A, the same capacity can be used for product B also tomorrow in his case. Today what happens? Some karigar can make only one type of product. Other karigar can make only one type of product. These two guys are not going to make the similar kind of a product. Then what happens? I end up losing my capacity because suddenly one karigar is fully occupied, other fellow is sitting idle. Am I correct, Ramrao? So, is it possible for me to create a situation where I can try to make them multi-skill? So, in the current context, can I use capacity? Yeah, you want to add something?
I want to come in here in the case of Mr. Ramarao. He is not having manpower. His problem is he is not having manpower. Now, I think raised a question whether I should go for mechanization. You should go for mechanization.
You have manpower at all. I didn't know that. Okay.
That's the problem. The problem with them is manpower. See, right now what jewelry industry is primarily thinking, the entire process is making jewelry is an art. It is not. It is not an art. See, effectively what you do is welding or soldering is an art. Nothing other than soldering is an art over there. You should focus primarily on having a very good solder, then it will work. So the question is, whosoever who are having right now your karigars, focus them on giving them the best training in best soldering. Then what will happen is you will be in a position to use their capacity very well, and all other parts have to be readily available before they start soldering. So those things can be very well mechanized. See, jewelry is nothing but strip, wires and balls. Nothing more. These are all the various components. And with that component, people are doing assembly. Look at that very clearly like a Toyota production system. Keep the things separately. Whatever the components separate and your assembly separate. Then you will be in a position to manage all your capacities very well.
Now coming to Mr. Umesh Bapat's question about that, what you call. Yeah. Okay. So coming to Mr. Bapat's question, capacity is definitely going to remain idle. I can't help it because that's the way the market is. All of us are sailing in the same boat. The boat has a hole. It's only saving grace for us. But the fact remains that how do I make my capacity flexible is what I have to focus on now, so that I don't face the same problem tomorrow. The fact remains I can't use it. So can I make it? Can I remove those hindrances which make it actually inflexible? That's the way I will start looking at it, sir. In that context. Okay. Yeah. Any other question we have?
In a way, what you are telling is something like capacity development.
Yeah.
Capacity development is almost equivalent to capacity creation. That is,
yes. Yes, adding skills. The same point. Multi-skilling and making your capacity flexible. See, if you look at that capacity, what do you mean by capacity? There are typically, broadly, I will say 3 major capacities. One is your space, second is equipment, and third is your manpower. How do we use these 3 things flexible is what I have to look at ultimately. When I add capacity, that's what I mean ultimately. Am I correct? So how will the scenario change with respect to capacity in real estate sector, especially during these days? Lavanya, do you mean to say about real estate when you say, are you talking about housing?
Yes, sir, housing.
Housing, I have a very disruptive view on that one, okay? which is actually arguable, debatable, not acceptable also view. but still I will put forward the view. Something very interesting I am finding. I interact a lot with youngsters, okay, because of my teaching as well. Invariably ask the question to these guys, how many of you are planning to go for a house? In a class of 60, not more than 5 or 6 say we will go for a house. It's a very interesting kind of a mindset I find in many millennials. Maybe Shankar, you know better about this also because you also deal a lot with millennials. Generally not very keen to go for houses. Now, how modular structure is going to work in this context? I am thinking now, I am not discussing what happened. I am speculating what will happen. When the people are not keen about going for their own houses, they want flexibility. Maybe tomorrow mini houses will become the vogue. Flexible, movable mini houses can become the vogue. What I am talking now may sound absolutely nonsense also. I know that very well. But I am speculating, I am looking into the future. This miniaturization is bound to happen. How many kids are keen about, check with your own children, how many of them are keen to go for houses? You'll be surprised to find the answer that many of them, not many of them, most of them wouldn't want to do that. So, if we are going to face a situation where there will be spread beyond metros, which is bound to happen. And with the current COVID situation, with most of us getting used to remote meeting and everything, I think space is no more going to become a constraint in that sense. Let us wait and see how does it pan out. Lavanya, I think I only given a speculated answer. Okay? Yeah.
Thank you.
What about the Chinese strategy? Mostly Chinese have plants with huge capacity. Yes, Shiva, but to my knowledge, I think they are also smart in not only huge capacity, they have flexibly capable of using the capacity also. That's what I understand from people who have been dealing with Chinese suppliers. Many are here also maybe involving Chinese suppliers. Maybe anybody can throw some light on that. They do have flexibility in their plants, phenomenal flexibility. And the kind of technologies they follow is definitely cutting edge technologies. So it is not that we can wish away and say that we will not have Chinese. Okay. Yeah, I think we have any other question we can open up and then we can wind up the session after that. Or if you have any, because this particular presentation, if you look at it, is more of a perspective presentation rather than a concept presentation. What do I mean by that is primarily, I put forward an argument to say that how to make capacity decision redundant. That's a very fundamental argument I'm putting forward. I'm not saying...
I asked that question about the made-to-order equipment scenario. Did you see that?
No, I didn't. Can you open up? Can you tell me that again? If we go
like,
up and check.
Made-to-order equipment specials, not the this thing regular product. It's a custom-built equipment. Those kind of equipment industry like ours, contract manufacturing people like us, we don't own the design. We manufacture up to customers' requirement, and so the variants are more. So in that scenario, how do we address this? I just wanted your perspective on.
Okay. See, when it comes to a custom-made product, custom-made machines you're talking about, I will slightly extend from what the discussion I had with Darshan some time back. Darshan is in rubber parts. But an advantage that Darshan has, which you don't have, is that Darshan also has volume in that rubber parts. But whereas you don't have that volume in that your parts. Because you make once, what you make once is not done again. Am I correct? Let me first articulate your problem, Krishnamurthy, then I'll be in a position to give my perspective.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, each equipment will be similar but not identical. Variants will be the main fort.
But let us elaborate a little bit more on that. Variants are going to be there, let it be there. But the fact remains that there will be for every method has got a madness underneath that. Sorry, every madness has got a method underneath that. I'm sorry. Even if you're talking about a custom-made product, you have to look at where there is a question of standardization. There are two broad standardizations happen in your kind of products. One standardization is the part standardization. Second is process standardization. Okay. When I say part standardization, if I am making machine parts, I have to look at whether there is a kind of a commonality across parts. Then I can be in a position to make my facilities flexible to meet that limited range of variants. Second is my process what you call flexibility. Process flexibility is fundamentally driven by two factors. One is changeover time, other is your changeover losses. In your case, the changeover time is a bigger challenge than changeover losses. In Darshan's case, changeover loss also is a bigger case because being a rubber part. Correct? Whereas in your case, you have an advantage of going for looking at only the changeover time as a critical flexibility. Because flexibility, if it comes in, then capacity can be utilized better. But if you look at it very carefully, Krishnamurthy, most of the companies are nothing but Punjabi dhaba. Gravy is constant, topping is different. Be clear about what gravy is. If you are able to catch the gravy can be your process. When I say gravy is constant, I'm talking about the process. So your standardization and flexibility at the process level can help you to utilize your capacity better. But this can be definitely understood much better if I see that physically. Then I can be in a position to see that in a more appropriate way. Okay, but flexibility at the process level is the way forward in that context.
Okay.
Yeah. Is there any impact on, okay, so Shiva, Dhanush, we need to have initially C more than M for some years. Well, you need to increase the capacity, do it modular or flexible capacity. Slightly other way around, Shiva, Dhanush. Initially, I would like to catch up with my capacity, like what Mr. Maradian said and Golrad said. If my capacity is small, then it doesn't matter. I will have capacity more than market. But if my capacity addition is going to be a costly affair, then it is better to lag the demand rather than lead the demand. That is safer. That's what typically Toyota does in their paint shop, but not in their assembly. So where to lag the demand, where to lead the demand is very important. Call centers continuously lead the demand primarily because the capacity addition is very easy. But whereas in the case of what you call a power plant, lagging the demand is much comfortable. So that's the way I will look at that. Is there any impact on import from China due to COVID? Definitely, we cannot wish away that we will definitely have. If we have to import, we will definitely continue to import as well. But we should look at is there an opportunity for us to catch up with them or opportunity for them to be divergent. Meaning, our skill may not be in terms of what you call volume, but our skill can come definitely in variety. So if we can bring in that flexibility, I think we can beat them on a different game altogether. You have to change the rules of the game in that sense. It's not a volume game. You have to look at the variety game. Okay. Okay. Shall we wind up now?
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
We have reasonably answered some of the questions. Think through is a concept which requires some thinking, some perspective. Okay, put it very simply, flexibility and modular concept is what I am promoting. Okay.